It's really strange because it feels like a really long time since I filmed one of these videos, and yeah, it just feels weird to be back in front of the camera just sitting here. But anyway, today's video we're going to be talking about 5 common weight loss mistakes that I see come up time and time again. I'm not going to waste any time, we're going to get straight into it. And point number 1 is seeing foods as either good or bad or healthy and unhealthy. Essentially, giving foods a label. Now, I totally understand why this happens. As a society, we're often fed the idea that something is healthy or unhealthy. We've got good choices, we've got fast food, which is always deemed to be the worst choice, and there is a lot of information out there that's constantly bombarding us with conflicting messages as well. Now, of course, in general, for literally any goal, there's going to be certain things that are going to be a more optimal choice, and there's going to be things that aren't as optimal, but that doesn't mean that they're inherently good or bad. And the issue comes when we do start to put them in these categories of this is an okay food to have, and if I'm eating this or I'm consuming that, then I'm on track and everything is going well. And this is a bad food and it's off limits, I shouldn't be having it, and this has no part in a healthy diet. Now, the problem comes when we put stuff in this unhealthy or this off limits category. We essentially tell ourselves that if we have that in our diet or if we're consuming that, then we have failed. So we need to avoid that as much as possible. In fact, we need to completely restrict it and have it completely gone from our diet. This is all well and good for maybe a short period of time. We can handle that. But over time, it's going to eat away at you and you're going to start feeling like you're being restrictive, that you can't fully live your life or enjoy it. You can't have anything that actually brings you any enjoyment. And sometimes that is what brings you enjoyment. And usually what we see is that it will lead to you wanting to have it even more. And there's only so far that willpower is going to be able to take you. From being in the privileged position of being able to talk to people on their weight loss journey and also work with people who are trying to lose weight, I see it time and time again where people view those unhealthy or bad foods as something that has to be fully restricted, so they will completely cut it out. And then weeks or maybe even months later, their willpower runs out and they end up going back and over consuming that, and then they psychologically have a meltdown thinking that they have completely failed, when that is just not the case. On the other hand, if you are able to include those things as a part of a healthy, balanced diet all the way through and be consistent with that, but pay attention to your total energy intake instead, then you can start to feel a little bit more balanced, you feel a bit more fulfilled, and you don't feel like you're having to constantly restrict. And ultimately, the key thing with weight loss is, of course, being in an energy deficit, but also being able to be consistent and do it for a long, sustained period of time. And to be able to do that, you want to make as few changes as possible, or just to make it as easy as possible. And to me, as someone who loves carbs, pizza, chips, chocolate, coffee, all those really good things, if I was to cut those things out completely, I know that I would only be able to last so long because I just couldn't maintain that. So to sum up the first point, try not to categorize things as inherently healthy and unhealthy or good versus bad, but instead try to think about having a little bit of everything and a balanced, healthy diet. Of course, there are foods that are going to be optimal if you're eating in a calorie deficit, and I've made a video on this which I will link down below if you want to go and check it out. So in regards to that, it will be things like higher protein foods or maybe higher volume, but it's also incredibly important to be able to have things that you enjoy so you can stay sane and that you can continue to be consistent with what you are doing. This doesn't have to be hard, so there is really no point in punishing yourself by preventing yourself from having things that you really enjoy. Life is too short. All right, point number 2 is eating back calories burnt through exercise. So on the outset, this sounds a little bit weird, but this is a question that comes up a lot, especially if you're someone who has used MyFitnessPal. To give a very brief background, when we want to achieve weight loss, we need to be in an energy deficit. That means we need to be consuming less energy than our body is expending. Now, obviously, the way that we get energy in is through what we eat and drink, and the way our bodies burn energy or expend energy is through multiple factors. There's 4 main ways, one of which is exercise, and that's what people commonly think of when they come to weight loss. There's often this common rhetoric that if I want to lose weight, I need to exercise, I need to go to the gym, I need to do a certain type of exercise, whereas we know that the energy deficit is most easily attained through reducing what you're consuming, putting yourself in an energy deficit that way. And then I prefer to look at exercise as all the other benefits that come along with it rather than a way of expending energy. However, we can't deny the fact that if you do some movement or exercise, you are going to be burning calories, and that's going to increase that deficit. Now, the reason I mentioned MyFitnessPal is because if you do have a daily calorie allowance on there, and let's say that your smartwatch or your phone calculates that you've burned X amount of calories through exercise that day, it will add that onto your daily allowance of calories. So this often brings up the question that if I burn 400 calories doing an exercise session, can I have an additional 400 calories in the day to eat? The answer is that there really is no right answer. However, there are a few points that I think are important to mention. The first one is that fitness trackers or your phone aren't that accurate in calculating how many calories are burnt through exercise. So we really can't determine very accurately exactly what you are burning, and therefore if it says you burn 400 calories and you eat an extra 400 calories, potentially what could happen is it'll put you at maintenance, maybe even in a slight surplus depending on what you're eating for your energy deficit, and therefore over time you might not lose weight, and ultimately that's going to lead to one thing: you thinking that you've failed. We want to avoid that at all costs, which is why taking a slow and steady approach to everything is always really important, and also managing expectations. But to bring it back to the original point, we can't accurately calculate how many calories you're burning exactly, so it would be a bit of a guessing game to eat back all those calories. That being said, if you do exercise, you might experience additional hunger on those days that you do exercise because you're expending more energy, right? So if that is the case, feel free to have a little bit more food. And this is where I always talk about it, but diets and weight loss and calorie deficits are so individual, and they take a lot of practice and tinkering. So you need to be constantly assessing the feedback that your body's giving you and working out what is best for you. Because what is best for me is different to what is best for someone else, and that is completely different to what might be best for you. So really you need to work out what's going to be the most optimal way of eating for you. And if on the days that you're training you're a lot hungrier, then I would suggest maybe even eating to maintenance those days, accepting that weight loss might be that little bit slower. But the key thing is you'll be able to maintain it and be a lot more consistent because you're not going to be starving hungry all the time. You're going to get more out of your training, which in the long run is going to be beneficial to improving your TDEE, which is going to just be good overall. And you're going to be getting stronger, and also all the mental benefits of training as well. So that's a huge aspect that often gets forgotten because people focus solely on calories. The second reason that I would recommend not eating back exercise calories is because it can start to manufacture this mindset of exercising to earn food, and that can be a bit of a slippery slope. Here's the scenario: you start working out and find out you're burning around 300 calories, and you go, right, fantastic, I've got an extra 300 calories to eat today, and you get to have an additional 1.5 snacks or whatever it might be, and that feels really good. Then a week later, you start to add on to that. You go, oh, I actually really want to go out for dinner tonight, and that's going to be a few more calories. So I'm just going to put an extra workout session in. You end up working out a little bit more, and that means that you go out and you feel a little bit more relaxed about eating more. And this starts to snowball, and over time it builds up and builds up, and suddenly we've got a really unhealthy relationship between exercise, nutrition, and your general health. That is what we want to avoid. There are so many benefits to exercise that have absolutely nothing to do with calories, energy burn, or weight loss. I've made so many videos on this, and if you guys have watched any of my other videos, you know that I am really, really passionate about all those other benefits of movement. So instead of focusing on exercise as a way to burn calories and essentially earn your food, just think about all those other benefits. We're talking about the mental health benefits, feeling stronger, increased proprioception and balance and coordination, being able to master skills, making friends, the social aspect of training, increasing your bone density, increasing your muscle mass. Whatever it is, there are so many benefits that have nothing to do with calories. So try to enjoy movement for what it is and remove that relationship to earning food. On to number 3, and that is relying purely on scale weight to track your progress. I think I've mentioned this a few times in some videos, but I don't think this message could ever be said enough. But scale weight is not a reliable marker of your progress with weight loss. And this is the reason. When you jump on the scale, the number that you see is telling you your total body mass. That is literally everything. That's the clothes that you're wearing, whether you've been to the toilet that day, any water that you have in your body, which of course you're going to have, fat mass, muscle mass, bones, literally everything. And this is constantly changing, minute by minute, day by day, week by week. There are so many factors that go into influencing how those things are changing, and then that reflecting in the number that you see on the scale, which have absolutely nothing to do with fat loss or gain. As an example, if you've had a lot of sodium in your diet recently, your body's going to be holding onto a lot more water. So you'll see an increase of weight on the scale. Maybe in the mirror, you'll be able to see an increase in how you look, just slightly. And this is just a temporary thing. As soon as your body starts to use all that up, the water will remove, and therefore the weight on the scale will go down, even if it is just marginally. And one more example would be if you've had a really hard training session in the couple of days leading up to your weighing yourself, then your body's going to be trying to repair the damage done to the muscles, and by doing so, it will be holding on to water as well. That means you'll see an increase of weight on the scale. However, again, this is just a temporary water retention and absolutely completely normal and something that we would expect to see. The issue arises when we don't have an awareness of all these different factors that are constantly changing, and the fact that it isn't reflecting purely fat mass, that we jump on the scale, we see an increase in the number, and we don't understand why, so we just immediately assume it's because what I'm doing isn't working, I'm gaining weight or I'm maintaining it, and therefore I'm a failure and I'm giving up. Now, there are other scales out there which will specifically measure fat loss, but again, these aren't that accurate because they are done by bioelectrical impedance. And again, this can be influenced by how much water you have in your body, as an example. Now, there's a couple of things that could help here. The first one being trying to learn as much as possible about the factors that go into influencing the scale weight. So that could be hormones, nutrition related things, training related things. Even things like sleep and weather have a part to play. You're not going to learn this overnight, but it's going to go a long way into helping you have a little bit more peace of mind and be able to rationalize when you see that number changing. This is something that I work with clients on a lot, and I absolutely love it when a client says to me, by the way, my weigh-in is going to be slightly higher this week because I've been out for a big meal which had loads of carbs, or because I trained extra hard, or because my sleep has been a bit poorer this week. It shows me that they're really starting to understand what's happening with their body, but most importantly, they don't feel like they're failing because they understand that this is a long process and that is not a reliable marker of purely fat loss. Secondly, make sure you are taking other metrics other than just your scale weight. So measurements are really, really fantastic. Literally a measuring tape, measuring certain measurements, making sure you record them over time and doing them once every month or once every 6 weeks or something like that, so you can refer back. Progress photos, I know people don't like taking them. I didn't like taking them when I was losing weight, but I'm glad I started to eventually because they show you so much more than you could imagine. So just take progress photos. You don't have to look at them, throw them in a folder on your phone, but you will have them there, and trust me, you will see a lot more in those photos, even if it's not reflected on the scale weight necessarily. And then another thing you can do is you can look at your clothing, how your clothing is fitting. And then finally, there is so many other things aside from weight loss, which you will see progress in. So make sure you're tracking your fitness if you are doing some form of exercise. You can look at your mood, how your sleep is, and how you're generally feeling in terms of energy as well. There are so many things to weight loss and focusing on your health that have nothing to do with your physical size. So you can focus on those as well. One final tip in terms of scale weight, if you are really set on weighing yourself on the scale, would be to try to weigh yourself more often. So if you can weigh yourself every single day and then take an average at the end of the week, you're going to get a much more accurate idea of what your body is actually doing week to week, rather than just weighing yourself once a week and comparing that. Because like I say, there is so much variability that you could have had one really carb heavy meal the day before, you jump on the scale and weigh yourself, and suddenly you think you've gained fat mass that week when ultimately you're just holding on to some water. On to point number 4, and that is having unrealistic expectations. I've talked about this quite a lot. I think it's really, really common when people are starting out on a fitness journey or on a weight loss journey that they expect stuff to happen very quickly, or they expect their body to respond exactly the same as somebody that they've seen online, or maybe a friend or family member that they have. But the thing is, we're all completely different, and that's what makes us amazing. But it also means that you have to accept that your expectations need to be flexible. Now, I say this regularly, but if you're trying to lose weight, I would suggest not aiming to see significant progress for the first 6 to maybe even 12 weeks. That's not to say that you won't see progress, but if you don't see progress in that time, that is going to be the most influential time where you think, this is not working, screw it, I've changed all this stuff, I'm just gonna give up, I'm a failure. And then the cycle just starts to continue and continue. Or you'll end up being over restrictive and then ultimately leading to just going back to where you started later on down the track. If you can set out thinking, I want to slowly and surely build upon these small habits, maybe one for nutrition, one for exercise, and just one for general lifestyle and mindset, and just add on to those week on week, but also say to yourself, I don't expect to see anything too significant for the next 8 to 12 months. As 8 to 12 months, I meant 8 to 12 weeks. It sounds like a long time, 8 to 12 weeks, but I promise you it will go like that. It is so, so quick. And like I say, you probably will make progress in that time, but if you just release the expectation that you have to make progress in that time, it makes it so much easier just to stay consistent with building those habits, to focus on those smaller things and then maintain them in the long run. It's exactly the same with exercise. I see people trying to learn push-ups and pull-ups and handstands and all sorts of stuff all the time, and they expect to be able to learn it because I know if you go on YouTube, you see a 15-minute video or even a 30-second reel on TikTok showing someone learning a handstand in 30 seconds. You think, wow, it must be pretty easy. It took me about 3 to 4 years to be able to learn to do handstands because good things take time, and we should be able to try and enjoy the process without having to constantly feel like we need to rush it to get to the end point, because here's the thing, when you get to the end point, you're just gonna move the goalpost and there'll be something else that you want to achieve. So try to reduce those unrealistic expectations in terms especially of time frames, and try to enjoy the moment and really work out what's best for you, really nail down the basics and focus on those things, and the progress will come, I promise you. And the time frame, it will go so much quicker than you think. A year now will be such a tiny little memory in a few years' time that it will blow your mind. I look back at my weight loss and I struggle sometimes to think of the details because it almost feels like it just went like that now. And it wasn't, it was a decent period of time. So just don't be hard on yourself, focus on now and really start to enjoy it as much as possible, because life is for living, do not live for the future. And that brings us on to point number 5, the last point, and that is to keep it simple and stop overcomplicating it. Now I know this is not easy because again, there is a lot of information out there, a lot of conflicting messages and people telling you what to do. But if you can try to bring it down to the most basic level as possible, it's going to do wonders in terms of just helping you not feel overwhelmed by the whole situation. And at the end of the day, if you want to do something consistently, you want to try and make it as easy as possible. That way you can actually enjoy it a little bit more. In terms of weight loss, I am bombarded with comments and messages and emails of people completely overwhelmed with what they should be doing, what exercise they should do, whether they should be worrying about specific macros, whether they should be on a specific diet, whether it's working or not, whether they need to drink a certain amount of water, whether they need to supplement. There are so many different topics and they're constantly coming in thick and fast. But you don't need to worry about any of that, especially to begin with. Your body will tell you exactly what you need to know. If you are maintaining or gaining weight over time, that means that your energy consumption is in excess of your energy expenditure. It's as simple as that. So all you need to do is think about how you can take those two dials and change them. You could increase your activity, you could decrease your energy consumption, aka what you're eating and drinking, and vice versa. If you are losing weight over time, and we've got to look over a decent time period here, then that feedback says that your energy consumption is less than your energy expenditure. Therefore, you're in an energy deficit and you're losing fat mass. I know it's not super easy to just tune into the feedback that your body is giving you, but if you start to pay attention to patterns and behaviors that you are going through, you can even take a little diary of it and just start to really focus on what your body is telling you in terms of energy, in terms of how your sleep is, how your mood is, when you're hungry, why you're hungry, and just really focus on trying to assess those things and look for those little patterns. It will tell you everything that you need to in a very, very simple way. If you're really ravenously hungry, is it because you've just trained and your body's asking you for some food? Is it because you're eating far too little? Is it because maybe you're not eating the most optimal food, so maybe you need to increase the volume slightly or add something into your meal? That's an example of potentially how you could use that feedback to assess what's going on, change something, and then see if that has a benefit to you. Again, this is a marathon, not a sprint. So we want to focus on being able to make it sustainable and consistent for the long term. So looking at what our body is telling us, making it individualized to ourselves, and just making it as easy as possible. All right, and that sums up the 5 most common weight loss mistakes. I really don't like that terminology, but it's just the easiest way to say it, I guess. But I think it's like the most common weight loss problems, issues, questions. I don't know. Anyway, if you guys have thought of any more, I would love to hear your thoughts down below. So drop them in a comment, or you can always head over to Instagram and send me a message over there. I'm always happy to help. Otherwise, I hope this video has helped in some way, and I will see you guys in the next video. Have an amazing day and don't be mean to yourselves.